Let's talk crochet. Hey folks, it's Mary, aka MercyTriumphs, and this is Slow Crochet. This is episode 083. I'm checking in on everything that I have been crocheting this week. So it's been a really good week. Last week there were a lot of things on the hook, and this week was a week of finishes. So before I get into that, I do want to give a quick shout out to my little first cousins once removed. We had a family reunion around the 4th of July, and it was such a joy to get to connect with some of my cousins' children. And we all pulled out yarn, and I got to teach a few of them how to crochet. I think they're going to be supported by other family members who do crochet, but it was such... Man, I mean, I don't want to overuse the word joy, but that really is what it was. It's the deeper level of happiness. It's that sense of fulfillment and goodness and like, oh, this is something that's not just a fleeting emotion. There's a deep joy here. There's a spring that's going to keep feeding and bringing life into these little hearts. And I'm really excited about the growth of the relationships that I've been building with those girls. And I'm excited for the future. It was so much fun, especially because we did have one knitter. And so we all enjoyed teasing the uninformed of the family and teaching them the difference between knit and crochet. But this is still a crochet channel, so let me tell you what I've been working on. Now this is one of my works in progress, and it is indeed finished. This is a small version of a shawl by Crystal over at Bag O' Day, and it is called the Granny Stripe, or no, I'll have it listed right here. But this I just used one skein of kind of a mystery yarn for. It's probably like a sport weight yarn, and I just worked all the way through that one skein that I had. And here is how it turned out. It's maybe 18 inches, maybe 2 feet across the length, and maybe 1 foot in depth. And so for this pattern, you go back and forth doing post stitches and granny stitches. I really do like how this turned out. I kind of played a little bit of yarn chicken on the edge to create kind of like a 7 double crochet shell and kind of winged it in the middle. And then just for fun, I added a vintage button on one side and a vintage button on the other side so that I can slip those buttons in amongst the granny rows, and I can make it as tight as I want to make it. I don't know that I'm going to replicate this pattern in the future, just because I had to frog back 3 or 4 different times because I kept messing up with the double crochet post stitches. I kept missing stitches or getting off my counts. Once I got up to the granny section, that was a little bit intuitive. And it also might be that I was working on this while talking with others and I wasn't really focusing. So maybe it is something that's deceptively simple. Maybe this is a pattern that you do want to focus on a little bit more than just go on autopilot. Lovely design though. I love how it goes back and forth between the grannies and the post stitches. Beautiful job, Crystal. Thank you so much for your tutorial. I love how this turned out, and hopefully we'll get somewhere out of it here in the future. In terms of this yarn, I am pretty sure it is an acrylic blend, but I couldn't say for the world what that blend is, but it is a nice kind of lightweight thing, so it's kind of like a cowl style. Happy to have that one done. That was one that I brought with me to the family reunion, and that's one that I was working on while I was also helping teach and encourage the others. Another project that I really wanted to finish up, and I was indeed able to, was this little scarflet. And it's getting hooked on everything. It's getting hooked on hooks, and it's getting hooked on my yarn ball winder over here. Anyhow, this is just a sweet little scarf, little neckerchief idea. I was thinking about just wanting a cute little neck scarf that had bobble stitches in there to have kind of 2 different colors. And I wanted it to be nice and long, but I didn't want it to be too thick around my neck. So how was I going to do that? What were the stitches I was going to use, and how could I get a nice thick texture that could set off the bobbles and also carry the yarn straight through? And this is what I came up with. It's taken me a while, but I have indeed finished it, and by the end of it I just thought, you know what, I don't want to be too persnickety about this bobble placement. I'm not going to double check to make sure it's completely symmetrical. I'm just going to go with it and let it be a little bit organic, and I really do like how it's turned out. On the edges here, I did carry the yarn up the side, the yarn that I used in the bubbles, and you can see a little bit from the back more how I was carrying this yarn straight through. One of the things I do intend to do is to go back and measure out how much of this yarn I have left, because I was curious to see how much yarn would be required. I have a couple of skeins that I want to do this in. This is actually a practice that has taken way too long, but there's some really fine yarns that I want to use in this idea, and I just wanted to make sure that I thought I would have enough. So that test is kind of done. Really beautiful how it turned out. I like the kind of subtle pops with the two different colors of yarn that I chose, and I'm very, very thankful to have this done. I worked on this on the road. And yeah, wingspan here, probably about 5 feet and maybe about 6 inches at the widest. So I'm learning very quickly not to even mention tutorials. I should just come out with them when I'm ready to come out with them. But this is an original design and it wasn't too hard to put together, so it might be something. Can't promise anything, but it might be something that you'll see here on the channel in the next little bit whenever I get that time, whenever I get around to it. But yes, love how that turned out, and I think it's a pretty effective design. You know, there's the Sophie scarf that is this ubiquitous knit thing, and sometimes it can be hard to get that same kind of feel in crochet, but I think this does a pretty adequate job of kind of having that same feeling without being something that it's not. So love how that came out, and yeah, I wouldn't mind having another one of these in different colors in my collection. So that is a long-awaited finished object. I'm gonna set that aside for now. Speaking of tutorials, here's one that I'm not gonna do, and this is my fault for saying anything about it, but this is my shawl that's based on the Winged Wrap by Moogly, and this is one I was hoping to do a tutorial for, but hey, when I finally had it done, I realized much as I tried to avoid it, I do have more of a quadrilateral shape than a pure triangle. So that tells me I need to go back and rethink how I started this shawl. I'm not quite ready to launch it out as a tutorial, but I did finish it. I'm going to drop in some footage now. And let me just basically explain, this is not for no reason. This was a shawl that I did as part of Gary over at Urban Yarns. Gary was hosting another mood board make-along, and he specifically requested that we be inspired by architecture. So for my mood board, I selected photos, number 1 of overlapping wooden shingles, and number 2 of some boardwalks that are in the area where I live. And these two places in particular, I thought, had that beautiful rhythm. I wasn't really thinking about architecture as something broad and expansive and encouraging and enlivening. I was thinking of architecture more as a homey place. And I was thinking about how when you wear a shawl, it really is like wearing a hug. And so what are the places that in my heart feel like hugs? The first place that I think of is actually my grandparents' house. The outside of the house had a lot of cedar shingles that overlapped. And so it reminded me a little bit of the architecture in maybe Switzerland, maybe up in the mountains, those kind of cedar shingled side houses. Really beautiful and really homey and comforting to me. And then I thought about the rhythm of those shingles, the rhythm of the boardwalks, these places that are close to my heart and the places that I've shared with the people that I love. And my thought was, it's not just architecture that's going to be there forever. It's not the Parthenon, it's not the Colosseum. It's something made out of wood. It's something that's here and gone. I mean, I could not tell you a single character trait about my great-great-great-grandparents, right? It's only a few generations that would kind of cease to be remembered unless there is some intentionality behind it and some preservation with some work to it. And so the thought is, you know, architecture doesn't have to be this great big thing. Ultimately, it's meant to provide shelter. It's meant to provide space, to make space for us as humans to live out our hearts and live out our lives. And so in this shawl, it's almost like the inevitability of time passing and generation following generation. It's kind of a linear thing, but there's also a flow to it. There's this beauty that goes in between the form and the function, and there's joy and there's artistry, as well as the more strict kind of lines and the underpinnings that are necessary to create a piece of architecture. So all of that poetry kind of made its way into this shawl, and that is what I submitted to Gary for his mood board make-along. I didn't go into that much detail in my little email to him, but I do have the pictures there, and I look forward to seeing who else participates in that mood board make-along, and I look forward to seeing all the results of the projects that come out because of that. So thank you, Gary, for hosting. You always push me in a different direction than I thought I would be in, and I love that so much about this creative community, that we challenge each other and we grow in ways that we never thought we would. This shawl, I think, is a testament to that. It's still a learning process that's ongoing, but that's also kind of reflected in the wooden architecture. You know, it's constantly in need of updating. It's constantly in need of care. And there's always something a little bit more that we can learn and add to it in general. So all that to say, this shawl is now done. And that means I get to start another one, but I'll get to that in a minute. Let me finish with the other finishes. Okay. 2 other proper finishes this week. Number 1 is the beanie from Crystal over at Bag O' Day. Name is listed right here, but I love how it turned out. I love this yarn. It is so scrumptious. This is Malabrigo Rustita, and this yarn is slightly felted, but it's a roving style. And I treated this as kind of a light DK weight, and with it, I used my H hook, which is a couple of hook sizes, I believe, smaller than what Crystal recommended in her pattern. And as such, I didn't follow her pattern exactly. I did modify it a little bit just to get the size and the length that I wanted. And in addition, I did not kind of tuck it back in. I know she has a certain number of stitches at the crown and then she brings it back in towards the bottom. I didn't feel the need to do that just because of the size of the yarn that I used and the hook size that I used. But how beautiful did that turn out? I'm gonna have to keep my eye out for more of this just because it was so lovely. I feel like it would work well in color work. It's such a joy to work with. Yeah, I cannot say enough good things about that yarn. We know Malabrigo, it's got a great reputation. I've never met a Malabrigo that I didn't like, and it's probably the same for y'all. So definitely worth it, and loving, loving, loving that hat. So thank you again, Crystal, for your wonderful tutorial. Speaking of tutorials, I actually am coming out with a tutorial on this scarf. Now it's a little bit short, but if you're like me and you like to wear kind of high-necked, high-collared, whether trench coats or heavy coats in the winter, this is just the right size for it because it doesn't create a whole lot of bulk in the chest and it still allows you to zip pretty high up. But this is a scarf that is based on a design that I came up with in college, and I would work it with just one single ball of wool ease. It's about 200 yards there. So I was working on this a little bit as I was spending time with my family, and it was just bringing back so many memories. Oh no, look, I messed up. I'm just now noticing that I totally messed up right here. I should have had an extra row in between these two. Oh well, that makes me human, and that makes this a handmade one of a kind. Anyway, this is a pretty straightforward scarf in my opinion, but when I was making it, I had only learned a very few stitches, so I could really kind of get a feel of the things that I did know. I could single crochet, I could double crochet, and I could do these 4 double crochet shells. So with all that said, this came together pretty quickly, and yeah, I was able to make a tutorial for it, and that was just mostly out of my own heart, just getting really tickled to kind of take myself back in time to when I was making these in class, and it was really helping me focus, but for whatever reason, the dean just was not pleased and thought that if my hands are busy, then I must not be paying attention. We had to have a bit of a talk, and bless her, I forgive her, it's water under the bridge. The world has come a long way since that time, and how we understand concentration and focus and kind of how holistic we are and how the brain operates. So anyway, fun memories, silly memories, but mostly loved going back to this design, and now I'm excited to share it with you. So keep an eye out for this tutorial coming on the Saturday video. I actually did finish a couple other things, but they are out of whimsical stitches, and so I'm not going to talk about those quite yet. I might have to film it and then go back in time when those are being released as part of the make-along, the worldwide make-along that Cassandra is doing over at Craftably Ever After. If you want more information, all of that is going to be linked in the description. But just so you know, I am participating, and I'm going to honor Cassandra, who said, please, please, please don't overwhelm me with pictures ahead of time, save them. I'm going to save it for you, darling, and I will come back to it when it's time, even if that means I'll have to have already turned in the book before. I'm trying to be preemptive because I only have this book for a little bit of time. I'm trying to pick out the patterns that I really like and I really enjoy. But yes, I have been working on a little bit of amigurumi here on the side this week as well. All right, now for the projects that I started this week. This is one that I was really excited about. I have finally started my Electrona shawl, and this is by Expression Fiber Arts. I haven't gotten very far, but I am using my 5.5 millimeter hook, one of my favorite vintage boy hooks, and I am using Barocco Vintage DK. This is the yarn that I picked up recently when I took a trip earlier in the summer and we went over to Asheville, North Carolina. So I have that all caked up. I have the first maybe 6 rows going. Literally, I just started this just because I'm so excited to finally get to work on it. I have a shawl done. I can start a new shawl. That's how it works in my head. And that means that the only other work in progress that I'm really focusing on this week is my Mount Trimper sweater, aka my ugly Christmas sweater. And here we are so far. So I don't know if this is the back panel or the front panel. It's going to be pretty floppy and loose, but I am already diverging from the pattern. I have decided to go ahead and make the waistband and then crochet on top of that rather than sew the waistband on at the end. But hopefully you can get a sense of where I'm going with this. So in this we have some basic worsted acrylic, we have some pink and white homespun, we have some kind of sparkly yarn, we have some tape yarn, and now we have some chenille yarn. I am working on both the front and back panels at the same time. I'm not really paying too much attention to the color placement per se. I'm not trying to make like these blocks of color equal. I'm just kind of going until I feel like stopping. I do think I am going to do kind of a bit of a chunky bit of this faux fur there in the middle though. But yeah, basically I'm trying to bust this out as quickly as I can just because I want to get it done in July, and then I'll be able to focus again on other sweaters and other projects that I have going on. So it's almost like, let me clear this out of my head. I've set aside July to make this ugly sweater, so let me just power through it. This sweater is predominantly half double crochets, and I'm using a 6.0 millimeter hook, my trusty hook from college days. It's still with me, and it is coming along a little bit faster than I anticipated it would. This faux fur is kind of a challenge to work with, but I am able to kind of see the V's on top, and I am able to kind of feel along which stitches have been worked into and which ones haven't. After I'm done with the kind of faux fur stuff, I will have to go back and double check my counts. One of the challenges with using random yarns is they're gonna just behave differently, but I think that's gonna be the joy of this project. So those are my 2 main works in progress right now, a beautiful shawl and a really wild and weird and wacky and joyful Christmas sweater. Yeah, so we will see how far I get on those in the coming week. There are another couple of little projects I want to work on. Those are going to be in the background of my head. Who knows if I'll get to them or not. We are in the height of summer, and that means the children require a lot of me, and life is really big and wonderful. So with all that being said, thank you so much for taking time out of your wild and wonderful July to spend some time with me. I really do appreciate you. And yeah, thank you to all of my subscribers. Thank you to those who like and share and comment on this video. Thank y'all so much for encouraging me on this little crochet adventure. Let me know in the comments, what are y'all working on this week? What kind of wild and wacky yarns have y'all worked with in the past? Let me know if you celebrated 4th of July or if you got to crochet during that time, or if that was something where you're just not able to crochet that much because you're so busy eating your deviled eggs and shooting off your fireworks. I hope you've had a wonderful week with me. I certainly have. Thank you so much for spending some time with me, and if I'm not your cup of tea, thank you so very much for listening all the way this long. I do appreciate you, and I do hope I'll see you again soon. Bye!